last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. Is okay with
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Well, hello there, listeners. Welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, wellness coach, and well-being expert, Darlene Marshall. And chances are you have probably heard about the much maligned placebo effect. And I often hear it in relation to criticism, kind of snarky, condescending criticism of wellness stuff. Right? It's other people kind of poo-pooing your ginger shots or your sound bath or your crystals or your whatever. Back in my beginning of my career, I used to work at this like very fancy luxury gym in New York City's West Village. And there were about 60 trainers, right? Like trainers, there's high turnover in training jobs. So sometimes there was closer to 50, sometimes we get close to 70, but like around 60 personal trainers. And many of them were these like big, strapping, charismatic men who had been college athletes or professional athletes even. And I started there about 2012, and that's before the term bro science was even like a thing. And a lot of times these senior trainers would be teaching workshops where they would be educating new trainers on whatever there was like their self-proclaimed expertise was on. And they pass around it like kind of, inside baseball on what was the next hot thing or the thing, the inside tips and tricks that no one else would know, because this was a completely different information landscape. This was before Facebook had acquired Instagram. This was before like fitness influencers were actually a thing yet. This was just about the time when you'd started getting fitness people, like maybe starting the first fitness YouTube channels, like Yoga with Adriene was just starting to catch fire around this time. So there wasn't a whole lot of social media content. There were a couple of decent blogs. So a lot of times you met your clients through in-person networking and you grew as a trainer through in-person direct mentorship, and having the respect and recognition of those in-club influencers was so important to being successful, because you wanted those like big deal grand poobah trainers to think you were smart, because then they would teach you stuff. I'm very lucky. One of those guys is now my husband. One of my husbands. I have had two. So I was lucky. I was able to like prove myself in their eyes. But there were two things that you did not want this cadre of charismatic, good-looking, super fit, highly athletic trainers to say about you. Number one, you didn't want my husband Matthew to call you a charlatan, which is still his like biggest insult that he will ever say about someone. Because I remember so desperately wanting him to not think that I was a charlatan, because it meant that you didn't know what you were talking about. And you did not want to be ostracized by this group of people by them thinking that you were just out there blustering and making wind, right? They used to call it entertainment. You didn't want to be an entertainer. You wanted to be a trainer who was like legit and you knew your stuff and your clients had good biomechanics. It was like a whole thing. So the first one was you didn't want to be a charlatan. And the second thing that you never wanted, these like very attractive, like one of our friends once said that our friend group was an Olympic village of sexy fit people, because we have people from all over the world in this group of people. You wanted them to say your methodology was legit, that you knew your science. So the last thing that you wanted was for them to say that it was placebo. No charlatans, no placebo. I will spare you the rabbit hole of what that obsession with evidence-based once did to, like, what it did to my ability to remain open-minded. That is a story and an episode for another time. But what I will say is that eventually I got comfortable with myself. I began to trust my own intelligence and expertise and my practices and knowledge. And that also for me meant getting comfortable with the idea that something that is helping my client might be a placebo. For today on the show, we're going to talk about this maligned, I did it again, this much maligned placebo effect, what it is. Why do I think that it doesn't even matter to me if my client's benefits are placebo or not? Because, wait for it, the placebo effect is still in effect. So let's get to it. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. We're talking about placebo. So the placebo effect, by definition, is when a person gets a real, tangible benefit that is either physical or psychological from an inert or known inactive intervention. So something that we know, like saline drip and your joint pain goes down, sugar pill and your depression symptoms lessen. That's placebo. Now, there is also nocebo, which is when the opposite happens. You get the inert substance and your symptoms get worse, which is interesting because the common variable on both ends of that spectrum is belief, right? The interpretation of your reality. Generally, the scientific world considers a treatment to have some kind of clinical benefit, right? Like the treatment that you are introducing is effective. It does something positive when it performs better than placebo. So what that means is that in like stage 1 trials of any new intervention, any new drug, any new, is meditation effective? They'll come up with some kind of placebo representative. So if it's a psychological intervention, it'll typically be something that they would call like the null condition, the thing that's not supposed to do anything, right? You're gonna doodle instead of journal. I don't know if that's actually a good one. I'm not a research scientist, so I'm coming up with terrible examples for this. But in physical trials, they'll measure a drug versus like a sugar pill or a water pill or a saline drip. And they'll look at what percentage of the people given the saline get better. And then they'll measure against the drug, the potential drug. Is it a higher percentage of people got better on the actual drug than got better on saline, the fake thing, the placebo? So a drug is considered to be effective when it performs better than placebo. But consider this, is that placebo is literally the power of belief that something will help. And that means that oftentimes people are poo-pooing placebo. Oh, it's just placebo. Like it doesn't matter. It's just placebo. Because it wasn't actually effective. It's just placebo. But the placebo effect is still in effect. People still got benefit. And it does actually change their tangible state of being. It's not just like, oh, my thinking changed and a magic wand was waved, because there is research showing that people receiving placebo have changes in their hormonal profile. They will release dopamine or endorphins or whatever neurotransmitter in that belief shift, in that change in the state of their nervous system. There is a neurotransmitter shift. And those are real physiological changes that have actual tangible benefits. Now, interestingly enough, one of the most effective areas for this type of intervention is pain management by placebo. And it is exactly for the reasons I just described. So endorphins, the like root word of the word endorphins, is endo, meaning endogenous, meaning it comes from inside your body. And the second of the root word is morphine. So the morphine that your body naturally makes on its own is endorphins. So endorphins are natural painkillers made inside your own body. And when people take a placebo for pain, they're body releases actual endorphins. We can measure it in their blood. So the people who begin to feel better on placebo for pain management is because they got endorphins released just because they told themselves, this is going to help me. So a person receiving placebo for pain, they believe they're going to feel better. The actual endorphins release help them cope better. That's wild to me. Now, for any researchers out there who are now clutching their pearls, thinking she's saying that it doesn't matter. Let me throw this out there. I believe 100% in the necessity to research how effective different treatments and wellness tools are. 100%, hands down. And I promise you, there's going to be a really golden rant at the end of this episode where I tell you why I think it matters so very much. So when I talk about placebo effect is still in effect, I'm talking specifically about when I work with my clients. I don't necessarily care if the exact thing that I had them try or they asked me to try did exactly the mechanism of action that it was intended. I don't care if the turmeric mechanistically lowered inflammation and that's why their shoulder felt better, or if they believed it, they would sleep better. Like, I just care that they took the turmeric, their shoulder felt better, and because they believed that it would work, they slept better that night. And then in the better sleep, they recovered better. That lowered their, like, I care that it worked. Because the placebo effect is still in effect. And if I try an intervention with my client and it's helpful, Yahtzee, it was helpful. And the only time that I'm going to think that's actually a problem is if it is to their detriment. This mostly shows up in my practice when clients or students will come and ask me like, hey, should I try blah, 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 newest fad? And unless it's going to hurt them, I tell them, try it. Why not? And a lot of times I'll give them the information about what I currently know and then let them decide. So try the Pilates class, try the massage gun, try the power plate, try the supplements that say they will magically cure your urinary tract infections. Yes, that is a thing. For anybody who doesn't know, there are supplements out there that say they will magically cure your UTIs. And for some of my clients, they swear up and down that they work. Great, Yahtzee. I don't care if it's a placebo effect or if it is a magic supplement. You have fewer UTIs. This is awesome. If I am very, very skeptical, I will ask my client if they want my opinion or do they just want to try it? Because I don't want to yuck their yum, right? I want them to have a positive momentum in their experience. If I think it is dangerous, I will tell them so. And I'll tell you right now, don't try the carnivore diet. I think it's awful for you. It will make you sick. Even Jordan Peterson is off the carnivore diet. That's not a placebo. It made him very sick. Don't do it. So something like that, I will be overt. Nice, strong opinion. But if I'm skeptical, it's not going to hurt them. I'll ask, do you want my opinion? If they want to spend $80 a month on green powder with such low traces of the actual vegetables in them that it couldn't possibly do what it says it's going to do, but it makes them feel better and they drink more water, do it, Yahtzee. Because starting off your day with drinking water and going for a walk and having a ritual isn't bad in itself. And it's unlikely that that $80 a month green powder is going to hurt them. Is it going to help them the way it says? Probably not either. But I think it comes to a detriment when we start to imply that people can't be well without these expenses, or we externalize what should be going inward for better information, for more introspection, for personal growth. Because if we can't be well without the green bath, the green powders and the sound baths and all the stuff, now you got to start asking yourself what we're really doing this for. You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and we're talking about how the placebo effect is still actually an effect and that effect might have real tangible value in your life, in the life of your clients, and the other people that you may serve. Or if you're someone who is out there going, that's just the placebo, how you might be doing harm in a place that someone else could find growth, unless it's actually going to hurt people and then don't do it. So I think it is nice to have my crystals and my incense and my massage oil. Like, you see, if you're watching on the live stream, like, there's crystals on my shelf. I did intention setting on those crystals before I put them on my shelves. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, you're not woo-woo enough. Start opening your mind. No, I don't mean that. Intention setting is a ritual that you do with yourself where you hold your crystals in your hand and you decide essentially what they mean to you, and you imbue your crystals with meaning and with a sense of power. I love, there's a particular meme out there. It's like, witchcraft is just spicy psychology, right? Like I'm conditioning myself to a certain state of belief with things like my crystals. Now, is it possible? Is it within the realm of possibility that there might be some undiscovered properties of the subatomic structure, foam, molecular, whatever the heck, that science just hasn't measured yet? Big old growth mindset statement there with the yet, that still exist. And if you doubt that, I want you to consider that there was a time in human history where magnetism was considered witchcraft and we killed people for it. Yeah, that's a thing that human beings did. And now we know how magnets work, because at the time we hadn't yet discovered the measurement of magnetic fields. So it might be that my crystals are magic, or it's the placebo effect. But the placebo effect is still in effect. And in an ugly world where so many people, I talk to people every single day that are telling me that they are stressed and they are overwhelmed and the world feels scary and heavy. Something that makes you feel good and hopeful is invaluable. That is what I want to stress and get across to people in all of my work, but especially in this moment of acute anxiety and concern, that our positive emotional experiences and our helpful, effective, non-addictive coping strategies are what actually make us more resilient so that we can handle that level of stress and intensity. So if thinking that this pretty rock might have a secret power makes me feel more resilient and able to handle what's coming, Yahtzee. I think that is very cool. Because what we now know from research in the placebo effect is that shifting belief shifts physiology, and a little bit of dopamine and endorphins might be exactly what I need to get through an otherwise very stressful day. I think that is very cool. But now we're coming to the ethical argument portion that I promised all you researchers that I was going to get to a very, very solid rant for you at the end of the episode. There is a morality to placebo that is not cut and dry. There is not a clear line, but I need to talk about it if I'm going to be a responsible content creator. If I know that something isn't more effective than placebo, the question is it ethical for me to sell it like it's a miracle cure? I think that the answer is no. I think that I am obligated to tell people, this is what we know about how this works. These are the ways that I have seen it work, or the benefits I have seen with my clients, or that I've heard or I've read online, or whatever. And then let them decide if it is worth it to them. Where I think that the charlatans start, I'm going to take Matt's word, the biggest insult in my household, where the charlatans start, is the people who overtly lie about this. And sometimes those lines are really, really dangerous. And they make a ton of money exploiting people's fear and anxiety and weakness by promising them that they will feel better. And it hurts them. And there's one very, very famous author and speaker. I don't want to get sued, so I'm not going to say their name. They're very famous and wealthy, and they were made famous partly from the book in which they touted celery juice as a miracle cure. If you know people who are juicing celery, they might be a follower of this person's work, or now it has become so ubiquitous in the wellness space that it's really gone out of the box. So maybe not. That's not the problem. Celery juice is not the problem. I think celery juice is the placebo that is not hurting anybody. And if it makes you feel good and you like it, Yahtzee, go cuckoo bananas. But that same individual says that it is communing with spirits that tell them what people need. They are a medium. I had a client years ago that insisted that one of the people that this famous person works with, they are a coach in that person's company. They are also a medium, diagnosed my client with fatty liver disease. Now, if you know anything about medical malpractice, you know that that's actually illegal because this person, being a coach and a medium, is not legally allowed to diagnose anybody with anything. So this client could have sued them, but they didn't. So they diagnosed them with fatty liver disease. If you know anything about fatty liver disease, you know that the person would either be an alcoholic or have trouble with their metabolism. Typically, you would do blood work on that person, maybe even some imaging, and find out, do they have an elevated A1C? Is there a problem with their metabolism? They didn't even drink alcohol, so I knew that wasn't it. Or was there something else wrong? But the trick is, this client didn't have fatty liver disease. They just had a medium, a psychic, tell them that they had fatty liver disease. And normally with fatty liver disease, you then have a nutritional intervention. You control blood sugar. You work with a dietitian. You wouldn't just work with a psychic from the internet. So instead, this practitioner, not a doctor, diagnosed this medical problem, told them to go on a no-fat, low-protein, high-carb diet. I'm going to break that all down there one more time. Doesn't have fatty liver disease, speaking with a psychic, diagnosed with fatty liver disease, and told to go on the opposite nutrition that a person would go on if they did have fatty liver disease. So a no-fat, low-protein, high-carb diet. My client showed no symptoms of fatty liver disease at that time, and it was winter in the Northeast. That winter was really hard for her. Her skin got sallow. She was low energy. She had these horrible mood dysregulations where she would get really depressed because she was just so exhausted all the time. At the time she was working with me as a trainer, she got weak. Her lift suffered. She lost muscle. She was just cold. The whole winter, she was like cold to her bones because she wasn't eating enough protein and fat to keep her body functioning normally. That is the point where the placebo debate gets ugly to me. That is the point where a person is manipulating another person's belief and doing them harm. She ended up getting sick. It wasn't great. And thank all that is good in the world, she talked to a different psychic who convinced her to start eating meat and fats again. So that was helpful. Not only was it very frustrating for me as a practitioner working with this client, but it was also so hard to watch and so infuriating to be in a field, in a discipline where people could just straight up lie like this. And this is where that belief manipulation becomes dangerous, it becomes illegal, and it becomes so concerning. And when you have practices like this that get lumped in with legitimate practitioners, like I hope that I am, and so many of you listening probably are, that's the point where I just get like up in my heckles, but also it gives the rest of us a real bad name. And I think there's so many of us who get into this work with an open mind and an open heart, and we so desperately want to help other people that we don't want to malign other people's beliefs, right? We don't want to yuck their yum. But if we don't speak out about what ethical practice actually looks like, we get lumped in with them. And then people think that we're all snake oil salespeople. And I don't want you, but I'm out here doing the good work. And I want more people to work with us, not less, because they don't believe us. So that's, for me, the great ethical argument when we talk about placebo. We don't want to demonize placebo so much that we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? Because there are some things that could be legitimately helpful if we're willing to have an open mind. Maybe sound baths aren't your thing, but they could really help your client to be calm and regulated. And I actually have had some sound baths and they're lovely. What a lovely regulating experience. Now, is it like realigning my chakras and we haven't learned how to measure it yet? Maybe. I don't know. We don't know how to measure it yet, but it feels good and it helps me feel better about myself. So what's wrong with that? You want to love up on your crystals and your green powder? Go nuts. But the morality and the ethics is the point at which you exploit other people's belief to make money in ways that hurt them. There's something wrong with you. In my opinion, that is where the line is. Be honest about what we can prove. Give real information and have the best interests of those who we serve at heart, and you will be just fine. And keep an open mind, because there's a lot of things that I used to totally poo-poo and put off because I was trainer raised up in an environment that was hyper critical and everything had to have evidence. And I think honestly, what that means is that I missed out on some really good stuff for a really long time because I was too close-minded. And I'm glad that I got out of that headspace. And I hope you do too. Of course, I would always absolutely love to hear your feedback. So if you want to reach out and let us know what you think of the show, it is info@darlene.coach. My Instagram is darlene.coach. You can find me out on LinkedIn. And if you're a fan of the show, I hope that you've already subscribed. Be sure to like this episode. Leave us a comment with your feedback too. Share it, write a review. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourself and be well.